The most vital area of aid to an information professional is the information literacy of their patrons, and it very often falls to the information professional to be the one to teach it to them. My courses presented me with a number of opportunities to explore the principles and ideas behind information literacy and truly learn what they mean for the field. Coming to the program, my view of information science was more of a service provider than anything else. Once I began my career in the field, patrons would come to me for aid. I'd point them where they need to go, and I would resume any other duties I had. Clearly, this was a poor understanding of the career. Information professionals also play a key educational role, even though they are not strictly teachers and professors, who are more commonly associated as educators. An information professional often is required to play the role of educator, especially for those who are just coming into learning about the functions of the library. My LIS 672 course featured heavily the idea of librarians as teachers, and my first written assignment for the course allowed me to dig into this aspect of teaching, both through the methods of how to teach and how people learn. Though I focused on only one in the paper in question, viewable as an artifact below, two were brought to my attention by the course and the paper-related research. The first was ADDIE. The second, and feature of the paper, was social cognitive theory. Both of these absolutely fascinate me. The first for the strong usage of methodology similar to the scientific method itself, the second for how it pays special attention to the psychology of the learners involved. I have a personal interest in how the psyche functions, and so exploring education through that lens was an interesting opportunity. I write on the topic of social cognitive theory that it lends itself to an understanding in which cognition and memory are integral to proper learning. Unless there's some kind of reinforcing stimuli that learning can be connected to, the brain has no means or even reason for it to record the information. When the need arises, though, I will more likely fall back on the tried and true principles of a scientific method-esque teaching methodology over the one I find personally fascinating, as it offers the more easily accessible and therefore speedy means of addressing the matter at hand. In addition to these methodologies, I also had the opportunity to discuss the matters of how to actually handle students. In the discussion about a reading by Parker J. Pullman, I raised a question about the two dichotomous struggles of teaching, being unable to engage students and being unable to control students. I asked my classmates what they thought of it. Their responses were what I expected, expressing similar concerns and suggesting their own solutions. I myself agree with Pullman's identification of the struggle to control students, and the value the principle of control has, and in my revised teaching philosophy, created for LIS 665, write, "It is already difficult enough to try and compress different learning styles and levels of comprehension into a single class-wide lesson. If a teacher is having to fight misbehavior at the same time, even less can be done in the few short hours he or she has." Of course, the control aspect of this mostly applies to much younger students, but for many of us, especially those going to the media specialist field in the public school system, that is precisely who we will be dealing with. The principle of student engagement, however, applies to all age groups and patrons of all stripes. It stands out to me that the need for engagement to be a major principle in the teaching of information literacy can be connected back to what I wrote about social cognition theory. If the student is not engaged, if they are attempting to passively learn, then they are not properly learning. As I wrote, cognition and memory are interconnected here. Without cognition, all that remains is the ability to store pre-learned factoids with no connection to anything else in the world around it. Meanwhile, without memory, one cannot store anything that cognition allows them to perceive for further retrieve and reuse. In this regard, I consider memory to be yet another valuable principle, though one inherent to the student and less something in the hands of the educator, though the educator would do well to understand it in order to aid the students that appear to be having difficulty. In summation, I see and am very capable of applying the value of information literacy education to all patrons of the library through any of multiple education methods, through which the information professional can educate the patrons or students of their institution. Understand that at the core of its education stands a few key core principles: control, engagement, and memory that must be carefully observed and managed, as they will define how well it can be imparted onto the learner. Any information professional worth his salt would do well to have a grasp of these methods and principles so their educational work can be of all the greater aid to their student patrons.